So you have your offer now and you're trying to figure out how do you analyze that. Well, obviously price, how close are they to the price that you're asking for? Beyond that, you have the escrow period. Are they offering something that's typical, which is 30 days, which is easy enough to go with unless there's extenuating circumstances. Mainly, you don't want an escrow to go too long because if you're a seller, the longer that escrow lasts, the longer something could go wrong. If a buyer needs that much extra time, you got to ask yourself why and if it even makes sense to let them have it. And if they need it, maybe they're not the buyer that you need. Contingencies, you want to make sure that at least it's the standard contingencies, which in California is 17 days. Ideally, you'd like to see those go a little bit lower. I'll talk about that a little bit in another video. The deposit, you want to make sure the deposit is reflective of the price. So in California, the maximum deposit that you could technically keep as a seller if a buyer breaks a contract is 3%. So a buyer who's writing a strong offer puts in 3%. Buyer could also put in 2%, and arguably that's enough. If they're only putting an offer with a $5,000 deposit on $1 million home, probably not going to be the buyer you want to work with. So beyond your basic, those bigger details in the contract, there's going to be a lot of little things, which is just case by case, not really going to get into that too much. But the other main thing when you're reviewing a buyer's offer is presuming that it's not a cash offer and that they actually need a loan, it's that loan approval. So a lot of times, what they'll send with the offer is they'll send a loan approval and then they'll send proof of funds. Proof of funds is pretty straightforward. Does the amount that they have in the bank match up with how much money they need for their down payment? Obviously, if they don't have it, you don't want them. Most people are smart enough that they're not going to write an offer that doesn't have the cash to back it up as far as the down payment's concerned. The other piece of the puzzle is the loan approval. To me, a loan approval has a couple components. The first part is if you are a conforming loan, then that loan approval needs to have a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac approval with it. If it is just on a bank or a mortgage broker's letterhead saying that they're approved, I don't think that's worth the paper that it's written on. Anybody can print that out and say somebody's approved without lifting a finger other than to type in their name and push print. It's that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac approval that really, really matters because what happens there is they have taken the application for the buyer, ran it through the Fannie and Freddie systems, and they have received an approval from Fannie and Freddie. So long as the input was accurate with regards to income, etc., then you have an approved buyer. You don't really have to worry about that approval unless it was done improperly. But odds are if someone's gone to the steps of getting a Fannie Freddie approval, they have done their due diligence in reviewing the paperwork. And by paperwork, I mean the borrower's income, assets, things like that. A credit report's required to run a Fannie Freddie approval, so that Fannie Freddie have reviewed the credit and found it acceptable. You'll be able to see the credit scores on that approval. It's good to see 700s, but even 600s are doable. So that part isn't quite the end of the world if they're not 7 or higher. And then the other part, which I feel is very important, other than seeing that Fannie or Freddie approval, is to actually make a phone call to the loan officer. I always call the loan officers and I say, hey, have you been working with people long? I see you ran the Fannie and Freddie approvals, but have you reviewed the income? Do you have the pay stubs? Do you have the W-2s? Do you have the tax returns? Have you really vetted these people, or did you just take a phone call and ran a quick little approval? To me, that's very important. And if I get the affirmative responses that loan officer's done their due diligence, then you've got a pretty good buyer there. And that's one to go forward with. If you get a loan officer who goes, let me do that and get back to you, well, then you pretty much know that approval that you're looking at really isn't worth anything. Not to say it can't be worth something if the loan officer then does what he was supposed to do, but you definitely want to see those items when you're reviewing a buyer. Because other than price, you want a closer. You don't want to get into escrow and 2-3 weeks into it, the buyer backs out because they couldn't get their loan. So that's real important to do that last step, which is to really vet that loan approval. If you want to talk to me about selling or buying a home in the Chino Hills and surrounding areas, reach out to me at my website, danmcgirr.com.